Hey guys, welcome back to the studio. It is Mary again with you. I am here today with a video that I had done a while ago that showed how I took my underpaper that I use on my desk and I add to it to create a thing. So I've done a few of these, and one of the things that I do with this underpaper is I'll actually turn it into an accordion fold book so that then I can use it to collage on top of and use as a mini journal. So I wanted to show you one of the ways that I do that. So that's what we're going to do today. First, I need to warn you that my desk is very messy. I know on camera it doesn't look so bad, but just know that there is a pile right there. There is a pile right there. There's also stuff on the floor all around me. So just want to make sure you know that you are not alone if you have a messy studio. If you have a perfectly clean studio, I am going to doubt if you ever create anything. So I always think that messy studio means lots of work going on. So, like I said, this is my underpaper. This one I think is just some drawing paper. A lot of times at, say, Michael's or one of the big box stores, they'll have those large pads that are, say, 18 by 24, which is what I think this one is, of either drawing paper or newsprint. I typically don't use watercolor paper because I don't really need something that thick on my desk. This is really just what I use to clean off my brushes and things like that. So this one, I'm pretty sure from the weight, is just the drawing paper that comes on a pad. You can rip off a sheet, you can tape it down to your desk. And the 18 by 24 works well because you can see it covers the majority of my workspace. If for some reason my desk is clean, I can just put two and tape them down. And I typically use them, depending on how messy I am, they'll stay down for a week or so. And then what I typically like to do is come back and add on to it. So this one, if you go back to a former video, I'll go ahead and drop a link down below. But I'll show you how I added onto this and where it started. But we are going to go ahead and get started. So because the sheet is the size it is, it's a little unwieldy for me to cut and show you everything on camera. So I made a couple templates. So here is my template for the book that I am going to make and fold. Because mine is 18 by 24, I can easily divide it into 6 by 6 squares. So I'll have 4 squares across, 3 squares down. And then I've only numbered these 6 because that is where we're going to be cutting. So you have two ways of doing this. You can either measure out your page and go ahead and either draw lines, or what I typically like to do is I just kind of guesstimate and I fold and then I cut on the folds. So if you were going to go ahead and draw the lines, you would just need to grab your ruler, which I'm going to carefully try to pull out of here. So you would just grab your ruler. Because I know mine needs to be 6 inches, I would just make a mark at 6. I'd probably do another one here. Now if you had a longer ruler or a yardstick, you could probably just do 2 lines. The nice thing is that my page is so messy that I've already lost one of my marks. Alright. So I'm just going to line those up, and you can draw your line across. Mine has quite a bit of collage material on it, so it's a little bumpy. But so you could draw your lines and you can cut on those lines, or like I said, a lot of times I just like to do the fold, so I will flip it over. I'll still make a little mark, I just don't draw the line. Sometimes I'll just hold the ruler in place, but I just kind of guesstimate where I need, because honestly, if it's not quite right, I can always trim this down. So that's the other way. You can just create your folds, and then I would do the same thing. Now, fortunately, since I have 4 squares going across, because it's 24 inches across, I can fold it in half and then fold it in half again. So in the bookmaking world, we would call this the hamburger fold. And then, I don't think they have a name for this one. I call it the slider fold because it's a small hamburger. And then another one on this side. And then if I go ahead and finish folding, on this other side is where I drew the line at the very beginning, but I'll just go ahead and fold it because for me it does make it a little easier if I just have the folds. So on here it's a little hard to see the folds, that's why you notice I keep flipping it over. So now I'm able to see my 12 squares, which is what I have here. So I'm going to show you what I'm going to do just on this little one, because it's a lot easier to keep the whole thing on camera. So all the black lines represent my folds. So if I have my sheet down, starting with the upper left corner, that's number 1, 2, and 3. So where I'm cutting is along here, along the 1, along the 2, and along the 3, and I stop at this junction. So I'm just going to go ahead and take my scissors, pretend that I'm cutting on my big sheet. So cut right up to that intersection of where 3 meets the next square. And then I'm going to go to my bottom right corner, and I'm doing the same thing. I'm cutting number 1, 2, and 3 and stopping at this intersection. So now I have one that opens this way and one that opens that way. So if you want, go ahead and pause this, take a quick screenshot so that you can see the folds if you want to remember how to do this. And then we will go ahead and get to folding. So it really doesn't matter which number 1 you start with, but wherever you start, I imagine is going to be my front cover. So I'm going to fold on that line, and because I'm making an accordion book, there will be lots of flipping back and forth. I'm folding over number 2 onto number 3, and now I'm at that part where they are joined and not cut. So now it gets folded under. So I'm here. I have these 3 folded up underneath. Now this one comes down. And then you repeat the same process. You fold over. So this one gets folded under that last one that isn't cut. And now from here, we flip over and come down. And then just finish up our folds. So you end up with your number 1 on the front and a number 1 on the back, but upside down. So as we open the book, you notice where these folds were. I like to take a little bit of glue stick and I just stick those together because then it gives me a more continuous book. So I just open those up. I grab a simple little glue stick. You could also use just washi tape to seal them together. But for me, I think glue stick's just super fast. Or you could use double-sided stick. So I've got that one together and this one. So you just have 2 of those spots where we did the fold downs to get to your next row that need to be sealed together. So now when we open our book, it acts more like a continuous accordion book. And you do have these 2 that are glued together. So if we look at it from the top, you have those 2. They're almost like your tip-ins or something like that if you were doing in a book. And the reason I like to glue them together is just I don't like how the book falls out. So that's just a personal preference. If it doesn't bother you, then you don't even need to. So now I'm going to go ahead and do this on my big sheet. And then we'll talk about what I add on to it. Alright, so just like my little mini template, I end up with a 1 on the front and the back. And then as I open up, I have a spot that I need to go ahead and glue together. So you see that the cover, the front and back cover end up blank because you're folding your art to the inside. Typically I start by folding it the other direction and then I come back and I just refold it. So I start with the art on the outside, but as I refold it, I bring the art to the inside. The only reason I do that is because it's a lot easier to see my fold lines if I'm looking at the white page, the back part, versus the painted part. So now I have everything going in the right direction. I am left with a blank front and back, but that's just another opportunity to create, or you can even just collage. You can add some more paint. You could do whatever you want. Sometimes I do like to add a harder cover to these. So for example, I would probably use one of my cereal boxes, make a cover that's slightly larger for both the front and the back, which then I could decorate, and then that would give me somewhat of a hard binding. But these give me some pages. Now, if you do not like uneven pages, I would definitely recommend measuring and drawing your lines. But remember, most of these, I just want to be able to use this page, so I'm not overly concerned. I would be careful if you decide to go in and trim, because remember, you have some spots where you folded, so you don't want to cut the fold. Even though the folds are glued together now, so you probably could cut them. Let's see. Let's see what happens. The worst thing that happens is I have to use some washi tape to get my book back together. So if I just trim that little excess off, and I do it a little bit at a time. These are the ones that are glued together. So it'll take a little more oomph to get through those, because that's actually 4 pages plus all the collage material. And then I'll just trim this back. Still not perfect, but that's never my goal. And this edge ended up pretty clean. And you can kind of manhandle it a little bit and try to line up your spines, and then take your bone folder or just something you can run along your creases that will set them into place. And then you have your little book ready to go. And even where I trim, since they're glued together, not a big deal. So that's another reason to go ahead and glue. And then you can decide, do you want that to be the inside of your front cover, or do you want that to be the inside of your front cover? Most of the time I don't really care, because I'm going to be adding more onto this. So typically what I would use these for is, usually I'll start coming in, I'll adding more collage. This one is really busy because I had a lot of colors going on my underpaper, so I just kept going with that. But a lot of times they're not quite this busy. But since this one's busy, I'll probably come in with some collage just to tone it down a tiny bit. But another thing I like to do, especially when they are busy like this, is that this makes a great doodle journal. So one of the things I like to do when I am either watching TV, or sometimes I'll keep one of these in my bag if I know that I'm going to be sitting somewhere and kind of stuck, I will go ahead and bring one of these journals and a few pens, either Posca, your gel pens, whatever you like to use. It doesn't really matter. But I will bring one of these along, and I call them my doodle journals, because I like coming in and just adding different marks. It's a good way to experiment and kind of play around with different marks that you like to make. You can see I went to my tried and true, which is polka dots. Everything looks better with polka dots. I'm going to zoom in just a tiny bit for you. So that's one of the things that's where my brain goes to start with. But this is another way that you can play with a different mark, something just to add some different interest. One I've been playing with lately is, it's a V, but it's more of an open V. And so I'm just trying to get my hand trained to make, it's almost like a little mountain range. But a lot of times I just need to get my hand trained to making a shape, because my hand wants to make polka dots. And although polka dots are great, sometimes I want to add more variety into my work. So I will say that sometimes if I'm feeling stuck with my mark making and I feel like I'm making the same things over and over and over again, here's one of my tricks. I like to grab a magazine and I go through and I'm looking for patterns. So I want to go ahead and try to make that one. Now sometimes what I'll do is I'll just grab my pen and I will just loosely trace the pattern I see. Because sometimes for me it's a lot easier to look at that and then bring it on to something versus just looking at the picture. So I like to just keep that handy. And then just coming into a spot that I feel can use that pattern. And you know, a lot of times I do this and I'm like, well, I don't like that mark. But you know what? What are you out? You're out a piece of underpaper and some fluid in your markers. That's all you're out. And sometimes when I'm doing this, see how this one kind of evolved to a slightly different shape? It's more like a wonky triangle, which I actually kind of like that one now. So how I go from here to here, and I eventually end up with something that feels a little more natural for my hand. But it's a different shape that I haven't used for mark making before. Let's see if we can find one more. I actually like this one that's in this watch. Just those little wavy lines that are somewhat, those are all perfectly spaced. Mine will not be. But I do want to grab a thinner pen. Here, I'm just going to use this one. This is a Sharpie gel pen. And if I were to take this circle that's on here, and a lot of times I'll do them like a blind contour where I am looking at the picture and not at my page. I really like playing with mark making because I feel like so many times I do most of the work on either a journal page or a canvas or whatever I'm working on, but it doesn't feel done. But as soon as you start adding some of this mark making, then it really just brings it brings out more detail. It gives it a lot more interest, so that, you know, especially if it's tiny marks and it causes people to come closer and look at it and try to figure out what that is and things like that. That's what I personally love about art. Like, I like creating paintings that make you want to look at them multiple times, because each time you see something a little different. Sometimes one color may jump out at you, or one pattern, and the next time you look at it, you think, oh gosh, why did I never see that before? So, and that just worked out perfectly, that I took that pattern that was on a circle and I put that pattern on a circle. So this would be a great book just to go through, fill in all of these little areas. Like, you know, down here where I have a little bit of white, I may come in and try to recreate that stenciling pattern that is already there, because That's a mark too. And just adding some of that in. And then when I have kind of a blob shape, one of the things I do love to do is just to come and loosely trace around. It's really about just giving your hand more creative exercise. And this is one of the things that can really help you loosen up in your art if that's something that you're wanting to do. I try not to hold my pen super tight because I do want mine to be looser and more organic. So as you can tell, I'm holding it not right at the end, but I'm holding it less than halfway because you have a lot less control. And I find that those tend to be the mark. Like, I like that mark so much more than if I was holding the pen way down and I came in and I made a rectangle. My own personal preference is these kind of loose, organic ones that, like, they skip over the paper because there's texture, and no two are exactly the same. So I know this is all personal preference, but I'm assuming that if you're hanging out on my page, you have some sort of interest in creating something that is not perfect, because that is what my art is all about. So go ahead and make a book. You know, you can easily do this with a masterboard if you don't have underpaper, but you know, most of us have underpaper sitting around. So if you haven't seen how to add on to this underpaper, go ahead and go back and watch that video, and I will see you guys next time in the studio. Happy arting!